Can't wait to taste you again tomorrow during lunch, winky face. From someone saved as Jim from accounting. I stared at the screen, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. Madison, my wife of 8 years, the mother of our 6-year-old daughter Emma, was sexting with some guy from her office. The same Madison who'd been working late 3 times a week for the past 2 months. The same Madison who'd suddenly become password protective of her phone, claiming it was due to new company security policies. I felt sick to my stomach. The signs had been there, the sudden gym membership she never seemed to use. Her car was never in the parking lot when I drove by. The new lingerie I never saw her wear. The decreased intimacy between us. She'd blamed it all on work stress and feeling overwhelmed with motherhood. Like an idiot, I'd believed her. I'd even started doing more housework to help her cope with the stress. That night, I lay beside her in bed, listening to her peaceful breathing while my world crumbled. Madison had always been ambitious, sometimes ruthlessly so. When we first met at a mutual friend's barbecue, I'd been attracted to her drive and determination. She was different from other women I dated, direct, focused, knew exactly what she wanted. But I never imagined she'd turn that ruthlessness toward our marriage. I checked her watch again, scrolling through earlier messages. There were dozens of them going back weeks. Explicit photos, detailed plans for their meetups, inside jokes about deceiving me. They even had pet names for each other. The level of intimacy in their exchanges made me want to vomit. "Working late again tomorrow, honey?" she'd asked earlier at dinner, not meeting my eyes. I might be able to leave the office early for once. I'd smiled and told her yes. I had an important client meeting. She'd seemed relieved, quickly changing the subject to Emma's upcoming school play. Now I understood why. She'd been coordinating with Jim for another afternoon rendezvous. The next morning, I watched her get ready for work with new eyes. The careful attention to her makeup, the fitted dress I'd never seen before, the expensive perfume she claimed was a gift from her sister. Every little detail now screamed of her betrayal. She kissed me goodbye as usual, telling me she loved me. I fought the urge to grab her by the shoulders and demand the truth. Instead, I waited until she left, then called my boss. Richard had been through a messy divorce himself and understood immediately when I explained I needed the day off for personal matters. Then I dropped Emma at school, promising her ice cream later, and drove to Madison's office building. The parking garage was familiar. I'd picked her up from work countless times. I found her car easily, parked in her usual spot near the elevator. Then I waited, watching the time crawl by until lunch hour approached. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. At 12:15, Madison emerged from the elevator. She wasn't alone. A tall man in a tailored suit walked beside her, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. They were laughing about something, completely absorbed in each other. I watched as they got into his BMW, my wife sliding into the passenger seat like she belonged there. I followed them to an upscale hotel 15 minutes from the office. Everything inside me screamed to confront them right there in the parking lot, to create a scene they'd never forget. But I had a better idea. Something that would hurt Madison far more than a public confrontation. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with possibilities. Madison had always been obsessed with her image, especially among her coworkers and our social circle. She'd carefully cultivated the persona of the perfect wife, mother, and career woman. It was time to shatter that illusion. First, I called her mother Barbara. She'd always favored Madison over her other children, praising her accomplishments and holding her up as the family's golden child. Barbara answered on the second ring, delighted to hear from her favorite son-in-law. "I need you to come get Emma," I said, my voice steady despite my churning emotions. "Madison and I are having some problems, and things might get ugly." Barbara's tone changed immediately. "What's wrong? What has Madison done?" I told her everything, including where Madison was at that very moment. Barbara's silence spoke volumes. Finally, she whispered, "I'll be there in an hour. Don't do anything rash." Next, I called our family lawyer who'd helped us buy our house. He agreed to see me immediately. I spent the next 45 minutes gathering documents, downloading copies of Madison's explicit messages with Jim, and taking photos of the hotel receipts I'd found stuffed in her gym bag. Barbara arrived just as I finished. She hugged me tightly, tears in her eyes. "I always worried her ambition would destroy her happiness," she said. "Let me handle Emma for a few days. You do what you need to do." I packed a bag for Emma and kissed her goodbye, telling her she was having a surprise sleepover at Grandma's. She was thrilled. Barbara always spoiled her rotten. As they drove away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Emma would be protected from the fallout. The lawyer's office was cold and impersonal, much like the documents he prepared. I signed everything with mechanical precision, my signature a weapon of destruction against the life Madison had built. Then I drove to the bank. Madison and I had joint accounts built over years of marriage. She'd always insisted on maintaining them. Claiming separate accounts showed a lack of trust. The irony wasn't lost on me. I withdrew exactly half of our savings, leaving her share untouched. I wasn't interested in taking her money. I wanted something far more valuable. By 3 o'clock, I was parked back at her office, waiting. The hotel rendezvous had clearly ended. Her car was back in its usual spot. I imagined her sitting at her desk, straightening her clothes, touching up her makeup, acting like she hadn't just destroyed our family. My phone buzzed, a text from Madison. "Thinking of picking up Thai for dinner. Your favorite pad Thai?" Red heart. The casual normalcy of it, the heart emoji, made my hands shake with rage. She was really going to come home, kiss me and Emma, and pretend nothing had happened. How many times had she done this? How many dinners had we eaten while she thought about him? I didn't reply. Instead, I waited until I saw her colleagues starting to leave for the day. Madison always stayed late, her usual excuse for her affairs. Today, that habit would cost her dearly. I walked into the building, nodded at the security guard who recognized me, and took the elevator to her floor. The office was quiet, most people gone for the day. A few workaholics remained, hunched over their computers. Madison's department was near the back, separated by glass walls that offered the illusion of privacy. Through the glass, I could see her at her desk, focused on her computer screen. Jim's office was diagonal to hers. He was there too, occasionally glancing her way with a smug smile. Perfect. Everyone who needed to witness this was present. I adjusted my tie, gripped the envelope from my lawyer tightly, and pushed open the glass door. It was time for Madison to learn that actions have consequences. Madison's face lit up when she saw me, then immediately fell as she registered my expression. 8 years of marriage had taught her to read my moods, and right now, every inch of me radiated cold fury. She stood up, smoothing her dress nervously. "Honey, what are you doing here?" Her voice wavered slightly. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Jim straighten in his chair, suddenly alert. "I thought I'd surprise you," I said, loud enough for the remaining office workers to hear. "Just like you've been surprising me for the past 2 months. Color drained from her face. "What are you talking about? Maybe we should discuss this at home." "You mean after another round of pad thai and lies?" I pulled out my phone, reading from her messages. "Can't wait to taste you again. Last time was amazing. My husband's working late again. Come over." With each quote, her face grew paler. Jim had stood up now, moving toward his office door. "Those are private," Madison started, but I cut her off. "Private? Like our marriage vows? Like our joint bank accounts? Like our daughter's future?" My voice remained steady, but I could see several colleagues openly staring now. "You know what's interesting about Apple Watches, Madison? They sync everything. Every message, every photo, every hotel reservation." She gripped her desk for support. "Please not here. Think about Emma." "I did think about Emma. That's why she's with your mother right now. Barbara sends her regards, by the way. She's particularly interested in hearing about Jim from accounting." Jim froze in his doorway. Several heads swiveled toward him, and I saw the moment he realized his carefully constructed professional reputation was crumbling. He started to speak, but I silenced him with a look that promised violence. "I've been an idiot. I continued, addressing the small audience that had gathered. Working late to support our family while my wife was screwing her coworker. Buying her gym memberships she used for hotel meetups. Believing every lie about company dinners and client meetings. Madison was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. I can explain. Save it for your lawyer. I dropped the envelope on her desk. Mine has already filed everything. You can thank your friend Jim for the evidence. He really should learn about digital footprints. Those hotel receipts he expensed to the company? Very detailed, including the room service. A sharp intake of breath from somewhere behind me, probably Karen from HR, who'd been watching the scene unfold with horrified fascination. Jim had backed into his office, probably realizing that expense fraud wouldn't look good to the partners. As for our home, I continued, watching Madison's hands shake as she opened the envelope, I'm keeping it. Your mother agrees I should have primary custody of Emma, given your extracurricular activities during parenting time. She's already signed a statement supporting my case. That hit her hardest. Madison had always craved her mother's approval, and now she'd lost it completely. She collapsed into her chair, documents scattered across her desk. Everything's there, bank statements, custody arrangements, divorce papers. Oh, and Madison. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Remember that promotion you've been working toward? The one that required a spotless personal and professional record? I sent copies of everything to the board of directors an hour ago. They're very interested in how company resources have been used for personal entertainment. The silence in the office was deafening. Madison sat there, broken, her carefully constructed world shattered around her. Jim had disappeared into his office, probably calling his own lawyer. I heard whispers, saw phones recording discreetly. By tomorrow, everyone in the company would know. But I wasn't quite finished. I pulled out my phone one last time, making sure Madison could see the screen. Her eyes widened as she recognized the number I was dialing, her father's private line. Unlike Barbara, who'd enabled Madison's worst traits, Richard had always been the voice of harsh truth in the family. Hello, Princess. Her father's gruff voice echoed in the quiet office as I put him on speaker. I assume you're there with your husband? Madison's breath hitched. She'd always been Daddy's little princess, the apple of his eye, the only person whose opinion mattered more than her mother's. Mr. Anderson, I said clearly, I thought you should know why you won't be seeing your daughter at Sunday dinner this weekend, or any weekend in the near future. I already know, son. His voice was heavy with disappointment. Barbara called me. I've already spoken to the board. I'm the one who called the emergency meeting. That was the final blow Madison hadn't seen coming. Her father sat on the company's board of directors. In her single-minded pursuit of pleasure and advancement, she'd forgotten the most basic rule of corporate politics. Never shit where you eat. Daddy, please? Madison's voice cracked. Don't daddy me, Madison Elizabeth. Richard's voice cut like steel. You had everything, a loving husband, a beautiful daughter, a promising career, and you threw it all away for what? Some cheap thrills with a married accountant. The revelation that Jim was married sent another wave of whispers through the office. Karen from HR was frantically typing on her phone, probably documenting everything for the inevitable investigation. I raised you better than this, Richard continued. Your mother and I sacrificed everything to give you opportunities. And this is how you repay us? By becoming exactly the kind of person I warned you about. Madison was openly sobbing now, her carefully applied makeup creating dark rivers down her cheeks. The designer dress she'd worn for Jim was wrinkled and stained with tears. Her perfectly styled hair had come undone as she ran her fingers through it repeatedly, a nervous habit she'd never managed to break. The board meeting is tomorrow morning at 8, Richard said flatly. I suggest you use tonight to prepare your resignation letter. It'll look better than being fired for cause. The line went dead, leaving Madison staring at the phone like it was a snake that had just bitten her. I looked around the office. Several people were pretending to work while obviously recording everything on their phones. Karen had given up any pretense of discretion and was openly taking notes. Jim's office was dark, He'd slipped out sometime during Richard's call, probably to rush home and explain things to his wife before she saw it on social media. Madison finally looked up at me, her face a mask of smeared makeup and desperation. "What about Emma?" she whispered. "Please, don't take my baby. You should have thought about Emma before you started fucking Jim in hotel rooms during her dance recitals," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Remember last month's performance? The one you missed because of an emergency client meeting?" Emma cried for hours because Mommy wasn't there to see her solo. The gathered audience shifted uncomfortably. Several people looked at Madison with undisguised disgust. Missing your child's activities for work was one thing. Missing them for an affair was unforgivable in any parent's eyes. I gathered the scattered papers from her desk, making sure she had copies of everything. "Your lawyer can contact mine about visitation arrangements. Though given your current lifestyle choices, I'd suggest supervised visits only." As I turned to leave, Madison grabbed my arm. "Wait," she pleaded. "We can fix this. We can go to counseling, take some time." I jerked my arm away from her grip. "There's nothing to fix, Madison. You broke it all, your marriage, your career, your relationship with Emma, your parents' trust. Actions have consequences. It's time you learned that." But I wasn't quite done. I had one final card to play, and it would be the cruelest cut of all. Reaching into my jacket pocket, I pulled out my phone one last time. Madison watched, her tear-stained face a mixture of confusion and dread. I opened my messages and began reading aloud from a conversation she didn't know existed. "Hey Ashley, it's your husband Jim. Just wanted to let you know I'll be working late again tonight." I looked directly at Madison as her face went ashen. "Don't wait up for me and the kids. Love you." The office had gone completely silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to hold its breath. "You see, Madison, while you were so careful with your Apple Watch messages, Jim wasn't quite as prudent with his phone. His wife Ashley, lovely woman. By the way, she and I had quite an enlightening conversation this morning at that hotel you two love so much." Madison's hands flew to her mouth. "No." "Yes, she was very interested in the photos I showed her, especially the ones from last week, when you told me you were at Emma's parent-teacher conference. You remember that day, don't you? When our daughter's teacher called asking why neither of us showed up. The whispers around us had stopped. Everyone was frozen watching this final act unfold. Ashley's lawyer will be contacting Jim tomorrow. Apparently, their prenup has a very specific infidelity clause. She's taking him for everything he's worth, which, as you know from all those expensive lunches and hotel rooms he charged to his corporate card, is quite a lot. I stepped closer to Madison's desk, lowering my voice so only she could hear the next part. "You know what the funny thing is? When Ashley showed up at that hotel room today, Jim didn't even try to defend you. He threw you under the bus immediately, claimed you were the aggressor, said you threatened his job if he didn't sleep with you." Madison's face contorted with rage and betrayal. "He's lying. He pursued me. He said, 'Save it.'" I cut her off. "I don't care who pursued who. What matters is that right now, Ashley is at home with their kids, showing all your messages to her divorce lawyer. Tomorrow she's meeting with HR. And Jim." I smiled coldly. "Jim's probably halfway to the airport, running like the coward he is." I turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Oh, and Madison? Those text messages where you mocked our sex life to Jim? Where you laughed about how I could never satisfy you like he did? I sent those to your mother too. Have fun explaining those at the next family gathering, if you're even invited." The walk to the elevator was silent, broken only by the sound of Madison's sobs behind me. As the doors closed, I heard the office erupt into chaos, phones buzzing, people talking all at once, the distinct sound of Karen from HR's heels clicking rapidly toward Madison's desk. By morning, the story would be all over the company. By next week, Madison's pristine reputation would be in tatters. Her career, her marriage, her relationship with her parents, her social standing, everything she'd spent years building, destroyed by her own choices. I drove home to our empty house, poured myself a scotch, and called Barbara to check on Emma. My daughter was happy, playing with her cousins, blissfully unaware that her world had just changed forever. I'd tell her tomorrow, in age-appropriate terms, that mommy and daddy wouldn't be living together anymore. As I sat in my home office, I opened my laptop to find dozens of emails and messages from mutual friends and colleagues. Word traveled fast, but I didn't read any of them. Instead, I opened a new browser tab and started searching for houses in the next town over. Emma would need a fresh start, away from the whispers and gossip. My phone buzzed one last time, a message from Ashley. Jim just came home. Everything's in motion. Thank you for telling me the truth. Our kids and I deserve to know. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Madison had made her choices, and now she would live with the consequences. As for me, I had a daughter to raise and a new life to build. Without Madison, without her lies, without her betrayal casting shadows over our future. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about elaborate schemes or long-term plans. Sometimes it's as simple as letting the truth come to light, all at once, in the most devastating way possible. Madison had always cared about appearances above all else. Now she would spend years trying to rebuild her shattered image, knowing that with one phone call, one conversation, one moment of brutal honesty, I had taken everything she valued most. And I didn't regret a single moment of it. Thank you for listening the story to the end. Write your thoughts about it in the comments and do not forget to subscribe. See you in the next videos.